And I will start recording. Or you're recording, Gary.
Yeah, I already went ahead and started the recording. Thanks for everyone joining, and thanks, Chloe, for this opportunity. One of my big passions is community and teaching. I kind of got started mentoring people in penetration testing several years ago. I would find people that were interested in going through the OSCP certification, and they would ask questions, so that I would share information with them, different resources I had, and help them out. And so the opportunity to teach came up, and towards the end of 2017, my wife was finishing up her the digital forensics program she was going through at Richland College. And her instructor said, next semester in the spring, if we can find an instructor, we're going to start teaching an ethical hacking class. So she forwarded my resume on, and I got hired, and that was my start of teaching. Teaching was a way for me to extend what I was doing on a smaller level just through mentoring. And then I later on started the Pwning School project, which is a meetup. We meet once a month in 2 different locations here in Texas, one in Dallas and one in Denton, Texas, which is like 35 miles north of Dallas. And the one in Dallas is the main meetup. We actually stream the meetups there. We started back in February, so most of our meetups are streamed. So that's an opportunity if you're interested in other areas of pen testing, as well as some other security topics. So that led me to that. And the Bugcrowd Ambassador Program came out in 2018, and I signed up for that. And I was looking at it as a way to help teach others and leverage some of the resources from Bugcrowd to help enhance my teaching. And throughout my mentoring and as well as teaching, always tell people, if you want to get experience, do CTFs or bug bounties. And so I just wanted to get involved with Bugcrowd to learn more about bug bounties and a way to help people out more that way. So yeah, the slides will be available after this. And I also have a VM that I'll use in this lab, and it'll be like a little virtual machine that you download and load up in either VirtualBox or VMware, so you have something to practice on. And I'm also going to give you some resources too on further learning, because what my goal is here is to teach you a few things, get you up and started, give you an environment to play around in, to try to learn web app pen testing through that. And so that way, this is not just going to stop here. You'll have some other resources that you can work on along the way to improve your skills. Okay, we got someone online that said, how may I be in? Someone online is asking how to get invited to your Slack channel. Let me see. They're wanting to get into the.
Yeah, I just asked them to DM me.
Okay, good.
We're good.
Okay. Okay. And so to start off, this is a slide I came up with for my first day of class that always let everyone know that, with ethical hacking, penetration testing, you need to have permission or it's illegal. So I really like this quote from Spider-Man, where his uncle was telling him, with great power comes great responsibility. And when I was making sure I had that quote right, I found out that it was Voltaire that actually came up with that quote. But to me, it'd always be a Spider-Man reference. But good way to get students to remember. But anyway, if you're doing pen test, a good way to go is make sure you're doing tests through a legitimate company or doing it through a bug bounty program. That way you've got protection. Because Chloe can tell you, because she's pretty, with her experience with Bugcrowd and the responsible disclosure, the disclose.io, she can tell you how important it is to have, to do responsible disclosure, to have permission to do these things. Because otherwise, you could help a company out. You could find a very serious bug, but sometimes companies try to punish researchers. They don't, they're worried it's going to hurt their reputation. They don't handle it the right way. So you want to make sure you're careful the way you handle that. So here's the agenda from the original. We're going to stray a little bit from that, because in past webinars and workshops, I've spent a lot of time on showing the virtual environment. So we're going to go ahead and skip down to the pen test overview and kind of give you the nuts and bolts of pen tests. Some of the terminology, methodology, testing tools. and then I'll share some further learning, and we'll show you some demos of some stuff through the lab. I've got my VM up and running for my labs at the school where I teach, to show you some things there, because the virtual lab doesn't allow us to do certain things because most of the applications are running on one TCP/IP port. So doing an Nmap demo is not really going to show you that much. So we'll show you that. So I think this way we'll get a lot more out of it, because this going through just the pen testing environment that I set up that VM can take a while. So we're going to skip on down. And a lot of slide is the environment is showing you how to run the different vulnerable apps. And so a lot of that's more information on how to use that. And the slides will be available as well as the VM. So web pen testing overview, penetration testing, you're assessing security from a malicious actor's perspective. And I try to teach, when I'm teaching people about pen testing, I like them to know the difference between a hacker and a cyber criminal, because hackers have gotten a bad name, and not all hackers are bad. A lot of hackers, the hacking term actually came about from people that were creating devices. They were creating software. They were making things work in ways that weren't supposed to work. And so these were people that liked to play around with computers and create and build stuff. And then the media kind of used it towards people that were breaking into stuff. But, there's a lot of us hackers that we do this for a living, and not everyone's bad. So, do hackers a favor, and then also it helps you as you're getting involved in the community to not offend people, and use the terminology correctly, because just like the term ethical hacker, that's a way to show the difference between the two. But web app pen testing and pen testing is a way to test it from an attacker perspective. And there's a lot of times that you couldn't find certain vulnerabilities if you don't try to hack into it. You may find a vulnerability. If you're able to exploit that vulnerability and get control of that system, then there's possible things that you can do beyond that. And so that's one of the importance of penetration testing. You can do vulnerability scans, which looks for the vulnerabilities, but you don't know some of the underlying vulnerabilities there. And so penetration testing helps take it to a deeper level and get a more accurate assessment of the security of whatever you're testing. And web app pen testing skills are helpful if you're going to work in application security, or if you're going to be a penetration tester. If you're going to be a penetration tester and you're not specifically wanting to specialize in web app pen testing, you still need to know a little bit of web app pen testing, because you're going to run into systems on the network that may not be some important app, but they could be running some web-based application on there that may be the only way to get in to the servers on that network. So even all pen testers need to know some level of web app pen testing. And the more you know, actually, the more successful you're going to be on your pen tests. And knowing web app pen testing, you can leverage that to also be a bug bounty researcher and make some money on the side that way. And the different types of pen tests, black box is going to be more what an attacker would be trying to do. You've got limited information. Typically, it's only maybe a URL or IP addresses. White box is also referred to as crystal box. And so what this means is you've got accounts to that application, sometimes documentation on how the document was built and designed. And so you got more information on it. And when you have more information, you can test an app more thoroughly, and you can test it in less time. Whereas the black box test, you're going to need more time to do a thorough test on it. And a gray box test, this is normally what most pen tests consist of. It's partial knowledge of a target. You got the IP address, URLs, IP address ranges. And so it's a little bit more, it's kind of a hybrid of the two. Web application, I recommend white box testing, and gray box, just overall general for your other pen test needs. And with the white box testing, you want to have different levels of accounts. So your administrators don't need to be able to see account numbers. They don't need to be able to see social security numbers. So you want to be able to view the information in the application as administrator, as well as all other levels of accounts on that system. So lower level accounts, you want to try to see if you can get administrator, get the information you shouldn't. So typically when pen testers test, they usually have like multiple accounts to test each account level just to see what they can get to. And sometimes you can do minor little tweaks to the address bar, or different HTTP responses, go in and tamper with it and log in as different user accounts. So having those other accounts make this a little bit easier to test. And web app pen testing methodologies. So the penetration testing execution standard is a really good standard to go by. This works for web app, network pen testing, all different areas you can think of. And I have the URL up here to the site, but these are the following main sections: pre-engagement interactions. This would be your scoping of the application, defining the rules of engagement. During the scope, you want to make sure if you're the customer, you want to let the pen tester know that certain things are out of bounds or certain things are in scope. And a lot of that's going to be determined by time, just like we mentioned, like the different types of test: white box, black box, or gray box. Intelligence gathering. This is another important area, because the more information you collect on that target, the easier it is to exploit. And threat modeling. Threat modeling, you're looking at your attack surfaces and defining the areas that you want that are most likely to be attacked. And then that's how you kind of form your attack against the system. And on most applications, like web application related stuff or networks, it's pretty self-explanatory. But I work for a bank, and we have ATM pen testers come in and test our ATMs. And so since that's a little bit different, it's the more complex the system and more unique, the more important threat modeling comes into play. And so you can just, like, for instance, when we were doing a threat model for an ATM machine, we looked at the hardware, we looked at the software layer, the operating systems, looking at those different layers in the physical, looking at anything an attacker might exploit. And that can change from wherever the ATM's located. If it's like in downtown Chicago, a lot of people are seeing it. So there's certain type of attacks that people are going to use against that system. But if you had an ATM out in the middle of East Texas somewhere where there's no one around, then it's going to be more likely people are going to try to do physical attacks against it. And so this threat modeling, we're able to go in and see, okay, how do we need to really test this ATM to make sure it's secure? And then vulnerability analysis. After you run like vulnerability scans and your different tools, you go through and analyze the vulnerabilities, and then you see what possibly could be exploited. You look up any kind of exploits for a certain vulnerability. And then the next phase is exploitation. This is where you're actually hacking in to the system or the application. And post-exploitation is like doing things to maintain persistence. So like if you get caught, you're in that system, you might create another user so you can get back onto the system or create a backdoor. And one thing to keep in mind with this is, after you're done with the pen test, you want to make sure that you document any backdoors and exploits so they can be removed to prevent a malicious actor from getting into the system or the application. And also by removing that, you're removing some of the vulnerability. Also, with post-exploitation, you're trying to see what else you can do. What other systems you may be able to get into. If you get access to this one server, you may be able to do a lateral movement and move to another system, maybe reusing credentials that work on that system. And then reporting. This is like one of the pieces people more dread, but the more I work as a pen tester, the more I actually enjoy, writing a report, because you want to make sure that in the executive summary that your C-level executives and your management personnel can understand this report, because they need to understand the risks. If you give them the technical details, then they may not understand it, but you need those technical details for the people that are remediating the tested device or application. And pen testing methodologies. This is actually something that Bugcrowd recommends as well, the Owasp testing guide, which version 4.0 is out, is the most current. And then the Web Application Hackers Handbook, 2nd edition. And also along with the Owasp testing guide, I also recommend learning the Owasp Top 10. When I was going through my web app pen testing class back this past spring, I hadn't looked at it in a while, and I was looking at the Owasp testing guide, the Owasp Top 10, and I realized, okay, this is why this is a risk. There's some things that I had forgotten about or maybe didn't know about those certain vulnerabilities. So just going through and understanding those vulnerabilities are very helpful. And just using this methodologies, that way you've got a step-by-step way of performing tests, so your tests are consistent and that you're making sure you're testing everything that needs to be tested each time. And so I'm going to show you those. Okay, show you those testing guides. And by the way, this is the Web Application Hackers Handbook. And you want to make sure if you get this to get the second edition, but also let you know as well. And this is one of the items I'm recommending you use to learn further about web app pen testing is Portswigger's Web Security Academy. This is actually, they're actually the authors of Web Application Hackers Handbook. And instead of writing a third edition, and they used to have labs available online that you could pay like $35 an hour for lab time. They did away with the labs. And instead of updating the book, they created this site. And they're starting to add all the different vulnerabilities to it. You can go through this tutorial, and there's actually labs on here too. So as you go through the material, it will tell you about the vulnerability itself and how it can be exploited. And then as you go through, you get down to, let me see if this particular one here you get to labs. So you go here and you can actually launch the lab and go through and practice what you're learning from the content there. And okay, this Owasp testing guide, if you go to owasp.org, and let's see. And you can pull up this page and you'll see let's go ahead and send this link out real quick, but that should be in with the slides. And after this is over with, I'll give you my contact information, so feel free to reach out to me. But this guy right here, you go to this page, you can buy a printed version, which is relatively inexpensive, but you can download the PDF right here, or you can view it online. And I already have the PDF pulled up. And so this is a testing guide. So this tells you how to perform, the different steps for testing in the Owasp Top 10. And they're showing, and this also, the Owasp site's really good for securing the applications. So as a pen tester, you can go through and find recommendations on how to make the applications more secure. And so this gives you an introduction to the Owasp project. This is a nonprofit project, and all this, they have a lot of tools, all their tools like Owasp Zap, which is a proxy, HTTP proxy that's used for testing applications. It's similar to Burp Suite. And so they have a lot of other tools on here that are free as well, which is kind of nice because Owasp Zap is free compared to Burp Suite's $400. So you go through, it's got the testing checklist and all this as you go through here, which is really helpful, especially when you're getting started out. You'll think, okay, did I test for this? So this tells you the different ways to test, which is really good. And I highly recommend going through this. You could actually get through this quicker than you can the Web Application Hackers Handbook, but this is really good information, as well as the Owasp Top 10 and the PTES standard that I was mentioning. This is really good because it really gets into detail of the different tools and stuff. And a lot of the things starting out, like your pre-engagement items, that's going to be, that's going to be pretty similar across different types of pen tests. And you go here, they show like required tools, anything from doing like radio frequency tools for any kind of wireless type tests, like USB. Let's say they show the USB adapters for like wireless Wi-Fi pen testing. the GPSs, the types of antennas. So they give you a lot of information on the different tools you need. And so this is really good. This overall framework kind of shows you what you need to do for pen tests, but overall, the high level is going to stay the same among all types of pen test intelligence gathering. And then they'll should get down into the report writing and stuff in there as well. And so it's really good information. And there's other ones out there too, but this one is totally free. There's like the OSTEM, forget what the acronym for that stands for. I think some of their information you actually have to like buy the guides or subscribe to them, whereas this is free. And this is referenced in just about most pen test books that you come across, and the CompTIA's Pen Test Plus contains that as well. And so yeah, these are really good information that I highly recommend checking those out. Okay, so we'll kind of go over this a little bit. And so web app pen testing methodology, this is kind of a little high level overview. So information gathering is also referred to as reconnaissance or OSINT. Years ago, it was referred to as information gathering or reconnaissance. But since OSINT is almost like it's a skill in itself, open source intelligence, that's where you see it referred to a lot. I mean, some of these other OSINT online classes you take or classes you may take through SANS and different providers, it'll go into more detail, but sometimes the more detailed you get with that, the more information you can find. I did a side project last year for a company, and it was like a red team engagement, which is more, when you're looking at the different types of pen tests, it's more like the black box pen test. We knew the name of the company. We knew the company name and their physical address because we had to test their physical security. But due to OSINT, I was able to find an IP address, find a device that wasn't in the list of IPs. I had to use OSINT to discover different IP ranges to be able to perform the external web application or the external network pen test. And so I actually found, by searching on the company name, I found an FTP server that was using the company name in their header. Because, a lot of times your company, you go to log into a computer, it gives you a warning saying that you're only allowed to use this for business purposes, and kind of gives you that warning. And so the FTP servers, a lot of them will have that same warning in the logon. So their logon screen presented the name of the company. So I was able to find a server that normally I wouldn't have found if I hadn't used OSINT. And I used the tool called Shodan. And Shodan's a really good tool for OSINT. And they usually run a sale around Thanksgiving for the Black Friday sales. I think they give you I think it's like $5 for lifetime access or something. But this is a really good tool to use. So gathering your information, even on web application, you can do Google searches on, the company name, and different type of Google searches. You can use Google Dorks, the Google hacking that you may have heard of, and search on different items to possibly find information on that application that you may have not found otherwise. Sometimes you may find passwords listed in the source code that maybe the developer had commented out, so they would have it there so they could remember the password, and then they mean to go back and take the comment and the password out later on, and they forget. And sometimes they leave it. Sometimes there's notes on there that could be valuable as a pen tester. So doing that really is helpful in your reconnaissance, your OSINT. And search engine discovery for information leakage just kind of plays in with your OSINT. So doing the Google searches, you may be able to find information that was leaked on that application. And fingerprinting, the OS web server application frameworks. This is important. A lot of times, some people don't do vulnerability scanning or port scanning against a web application, but there's times you can find information that's valuable. And these next two items, we mentioned vulnerability scanning and port and service scanning. A lot of times companies may migrate to a new framework or web server. Maybe they were using Apache and then they went to Microsoft IIS, or maybe they went to from just a regular Apache server to a Red Hat Tomcat server, or maybe Apache Tomcat. I mean, actually, Apache or Red Hat is JBoss for their Java server, and then Tomcat is by Apache. So they may switch to that, and the older web server may have not been maintained and patched. Maybe people forgot about it. So you may be able to possibly go in and hack into that older web server. You may be able to get in that way without, get around going through the application. And so also during the methodology, you want to test for the Owasp Top 10 vulnerabilities. And Owasp Top 10 has become pretty much the standard. There's like an OWASP, which is Open Web Application Security Consortium. There were another one out there that's still well known, and maybe another area to look at, but OWASP has kind of overtaken them in popularity and use. Most of the tools you see when you're doing web application vulnerability scans, they will list the Owasp Top 10, which area of the Owasp Top 10 that certain vulnerability falls under. And after this, one of the things also, once you get through all this, your vulnerability scans and all that, then you want to see if you can exploit any of the vulnerabilities you found. This goes back to the PTES information, their methodology, that the vulnerability analysis would follow after you've collected and tested for this information. And different pen testing tools out there, web app pen testing tools. There's web application vulnerability scanners, also known as dynamic application security testing, or the acronym is DAST. And a popular ones there are IBM Security App Scan and Fortify Web Inspect, which is one of a subsidiary of HP, which is very popular. App Scan and Web Inspect were two of the first and most popular, but NetSparker, Acunetics, and Arachne have came out since then. NetSparker and Acunetics are not as expensive as Fortify Web Inspect or App Scan. Some of these tools can run anywhere up to $8,000 to $10,000, and I believe like NetSparker and Acunetics are between $5,000 to $2,500. And Arachne is a free web app pen tester, web application vulnerability scanner that is typically installed on Kali Linux, or you can install it. It's in the repositories to install. And this is where, Burp Suite has become popular, because Burp Suite is $400 for the commercial version. Zap is free. And there's also static application security testing to test source code. There's also, there's tools out there like Veracode and Fortify for doing static code analysis. And so this is like typically what will be done in the development stages before the code goes live. You run the static code analysis tools against that to find any kind of possible errors in the code that can be corrected before it goes into production. And as developers update the code, then the source code should go through this. This actually should be part of the software development lifecycle. Security should be built into it. So once you go through these phases that you're using Agile for your development process, then you want to make sure to put this in there along with like QA testing. So you want to make sure once you get new function into your application, or as you just update, try to fix possible security problems, you want to make sure to run this too and include this. And this is important because this is testing the code at rest, and dynamic is testing it in action. So as it's running on the server, as it's being rendered in the browser to a user. And interception proxies, Burp Suite and Zap are what you call interception proxies. And what this means is this tool sits between your browser and the web application of the web server. So you're able to intercept this content before it gets to your browser. You can tamper, say like the URL may have like ID equals 1. You can go in and see if you can change that to 2 or 3 and see if you can bypass authentication. Maybe you can get to certain levels on the system that you shouldn't be able to. So this is where interception proxies are important. These two, if you have the commercial version of Burp Suite, it also does vulnerability scanning and Zap does vulnerability scanning. It's a free tool, and it doesn't cost anything for the added functionality. So this is when you're doing your test, you want to run your vulnerability scanner, see any vulnerabilities you can find, and then go through and do your manual testing against the application. And SQL Map, this is a good tool for testing SQL injection. This is one of the, in the Owasp Top 10 under the injection vulnerabilities. And SQL injection allows you to like manipulate or submit actual queries to the backend database of that application, which you shouldn't. You should have like stored procedures that create queries and only allow certain things to prevent someone from the outside sending any kind of query they want to, because you could dump the database. You can actually go through and get user credentials for the database. You can, on some systems like with Microsoft SQL, if you have the XP command shell enabled, then you can get command line access to that server. And I've done that on a pen test before, where I was testing an application, found a SQL injection vulnerability, and actually used SQL Map to exploit that system. And I was able to get command line access to that Microsoft SQL server. And I was on the outside. This was coming from the internet internally to this company. And I was able to dump passwords from the operating system and easily crack the password. You see all the times you take, go to these security webinars or conferences, and people will tell you about systems using password all lowercase. And actually the service account that was running the application was actually using the username or the password all lowercase with the number 1. And so it took John the Ripper like 30 seconds or less to crack the password. And so also network pen testing, it's important to, you need to test the infrastructure. Sometimes companies will handle this different. They'll do like a separate infrastructure pen test and network pen test of that system, or sometimes they will do both. So you want to make sure that all layers have been, you're testing the network as well as the application itself. Because as mentioned a while ago, unused abandoned service or applications, not only web servers, you may find an FTP server that allows anonymous access, or maybe you could easily guess the username. And so that's where you want to check for this. This is where your Nmap scans and then your Nessus vulnerability scans. And the tools like Nessus, they will can show you web application vulnerabilities too, because they actually have plugins for web applications. And you can actually you do an authenticated scan where you put in the credentials of the application and then test as you go. So these are all important. Sometimes you usually see, sometimes the test may be just purely application, but it's still worth looking at. Even if you just run Nmap, there's things that you could do there that you could find some important information for your test. And let's see. Go ahead and we're going to go into this lab and demonstrate some of the command line tools. The little lab VM that I'm going to share with you contains like 8 different vulnerable apps. So it makes it nice because you've got this one environment that's a Kali Linux VM, and then it's got your targets on that same system. So you don't have to worry about getting 2 VMs to connect. When I was originally setting up those VMs for a workshop, one of the things I looked at is, it doesn't matter. You're going to have 2 VMs that are exact, and someone's computer is not going to like it, and you're not going to be able to connect to the network. So I wanted to make sure that it was easy to get set up, as little problems as possible, and take up less disk space, because you got two separate VMs, it's going to possibly take up more disk space. And so I want to make sure, because, just trying to come up with 20 gigs of disk space for a workshop sometimes is pretty tough. And so So here's a little tool. This is not really so much web, but if you're on a network, you can discover hosts this way. And this tool we're using is called Net Discover, and it's actually using ARP to find these target systems on your network. Is everyone able to see the screen okay? Yeah, this is a little more difficult in my class because I have this on an overhead projector, and just trying to scale it to where people can see it in the classroom is kind of tough. So, okay. So doing this to discover all the IP addresses. One of the IP addresses on the lab's not listed there. So running this real quick to see if we can find something to do an nmap scan again. So actually we did nmap, and what I did is I did this dash uppercase P lowercase n. That prevents you from having to probe each system. And if you don't probe a system, it's not waiting for a response back. And so this makes your scans go quicker. And this dash T4 controls the speed. It goes anywhere from like T1 up to I think T6. Once you start going over T4, then it scans a little quick, and you may miss ports. And so that's why we don't run it too fast. And so here you can look at this system right here. This is, if this was exposed to the internet or internal, you can find out that you're running MySQL on the server, and it's running FTP. No. So since 108 is showing several ports open, and when you rerun an nmap scan, by default, it selects like the top 1,000 ports or so, and you can actually use, there's actually 65,535 total TCP/IP ports. And so sometimes in your scans, you want to try to scan all the ports to make sure you're not missing anything. And so we're going to go back and test this 108. What we're doing this time is we're going to add a couple other items. This runs the script, default scripts, which is different scripts. If it finds a certain type of service, then it'll run scripts against it. And then this right here, this runs a script, and this does a send connection, which means if it goes to connect via TCP IP, it doesn't expect a full connection. And so we're going to run this, and then we're going to go ahead and set our port. And if you do dash, that scans all the ports. Yeah, the full TCP connection, it expects, so whenever it connects, it expects a response. So it's going to have that port fully open and actually make a connection. Whereas the send scan, it'll take a half connection. So if the port only opens partially, then it will test the port. And so sometimes you're doing tests, and you're communicating, and there's the possibility you're not going to make a full connection due to the TCP, the way TCP/IP works. It could be a lot of traffic on that network or something. So actually you can hit the V key, and should make it more verbose. So right now and this should give you more information on the scan. So once we did this, it's telling us the time that we, this left, this remaining. So we found a port here, 3500, that on the IP range earlier, we actually didn't get that one. And also you can look at the state. Okay, so it's showing the TCP port is open. So these are usually you can exploit. If it's closed, we're not gonna be able to do anything there. If it's filtered, then it's going between a firewall and it might as well be closed. But the information it gives you that is good is if you're on that system and you hack into it, then you know these are ports open that you can go out through. Maybe you can see applications that are running on there that once you're on the system that you can exploit. And so Nmap, that's a good tool to use. And let's see. I mean, it's definitely one you have to use in network, but it does come in helpful on application testing too. Okay, so it's completed. Sometimes this can take a little bit longer depending on the system, but what happens when we're referring to these default scripts, Nmap has these scripts are referred to that are NSE scripts, which stands for Nmap scripting engine. So you can write different tools with it. Some of it you can actually be used to hack. You can actually check for anonymous FTP. So there's a lot of different little tools, and by default, there's a default set of scripts that it runs. There's extended scripts, but you can see how now we're able to get you can see the host keys for SSH. You're able to go through here and okay, we see on port 80. See, so that we're seeing now that there's several like different HTTP apps on here. So there's some kind of chat application, Drupal, which is a content management system, and they even appear to have like a payroll app on that system, and it's using PHP admin. So you can go out and look on like exploit DB for PHP myadmin to find exploits. And so actually, if you want to, and this is running like the running cups, which is typically used for printing. These other ports up here show you the different HTTP methods that can be used, like get and post are relatively safe. Options let you know what all is running on there, but if you see, sometimes they have like a put or delete HTTP method, and so that allows you to upload files to that server, and the delete will actually let you delete files, so you don't want those services running. So those are some of the services that you want to watch for. And another tool right here, since we're here, another command line tool is called Nikto. It's kind of it's a web application vulnerability scanner that runs from the command line, and this works fairly fast. And so since this is on port 80, we can use this HTTP for that. And so we're going to go here and look at port 80 on this application. And see what we find. And so you see we're finding some information here, and this will give you like some of the open source vulnerability database numbers, so you can actually go look these up, and it can tell you some of these possible vulnerabilities there. And sometimes it'll tell you how they can be exploited, or there's exploit code for it. And see, we go back here to the PHP myadmin, so we see that there's this OS VDB vulnerability database number 3092. So you can see that P admin is for managing MySQL databases and should be protected. So yeah, you really don't want, in this case, you really don't want it limited. You would restrict it to certain IP addresses on the internet. You don't want that exposed at all. But there's vulnerabilities you could possibly get in there and get into the database. So this would even eliminate the need for even be able to having to do SQL injection to tamper with the database or get information from the database. You can see here's one that actually has a link to MITRE for some different CV on these vulnerabilities. And so this is giving you a lot more information that we didn't get from our scan with Nmap. But there's also another switch that you can add as well that will run a script that, let's see, that will check for vulnerabilities. And to add a specific script, you just do -- script and then the name of the script that we're going to run. And let's see, we're going to just limit this down to port 80 so it doesn't run as long. And you can do specific ports this way. And so we can see what this looks like compared to what Nikto. But Nikto, I've actually found things with Nikto before that I couldn't find with Nessus, which is a commercial vulnerability scanner. Nessus is pretty good, but sometimes one vulnerability a scanner will find something that another vulnerability scanner may miss. And so it ran one of these scripts and it's not vulnerable, but it says hosts are all up, not vulnerable. So it's not vulnerable to this particular denial of service vulnerability, which is kind of weird. I think this is the only one that really, one of the only ones that does that where it shows, yeah, this is the pre-scan script results. And so this is actually showing the vulnerability, but that it's not vulnerable to that vulnerability. And so we're looking here on, well, it's not, I think trying to autocorrect the wrong thing. Making sure I had that typed in right. My PHP admin. Okay. This exploit database is a good place to look for vulnerabilities and, well, actually exploits for vulnerabilities. So we like put in Apache for like Apache web server. You can see the different exploits listed on there. And a lot of these are already built in. There's like a local version of this database on Kali Linux. So as long as you keep Kali up to date, you'll have these vulnerabilities on there. And so there's a tool you can use to search for those exploits. And so we can go in here and it's called Searchploit. So we're going to put in the term. This is kind of interesting. My PHP admin. Okay, so we just searched on a certain type of FTP daemon or FTP server, and this shows some of the different vulnerabilities there. And so they're stored locally. And so the path to exploit DB is /user/share/exploit DB. And then to get to that file, then this is a further extension of that directory. So this is the actual file. So you can actually execute it from that path, or you can copy it over to like your user directory and execute these. And you can see the vulnerabilities are like this one is Perl since it's PL. This one is a basic shell script. And this is a C program, which that usually requires compiling. And then this one's Ruby. And typically if it's Ruby, there's a good chance it's a Metasploit module. So those are some ways that you can look up the vulnerabilities on there. I know this is kind of getting away from, you could still on a web application pen test run into times that you need to download exploit code. And so here from the scan, we're able to see that it was running on Ubuntu. Well, it says OS Windows 6.1 or Samba. So this could be Ubuntu, which I believe this one actually is. And so Nmap is a pretty good tool. I mean, you could do a whole workshop on Nmap by itself. So and so this is the VM that I'll give everyone a link to the Google Drive. And this one is set up to where you can practice web app pen testing with it. And also too, to make note is there's a little note keeping tool. This is kind of like OneNote or Evernote. It's called Cherrytree. They used to have Keep Note in Kali Linux, but this is a better, more stable version note-taking system. And I went in and I put notes on how to start like the scripts to start the vulnerable apps. And I've also got a link here to Arachne. This is the web application vulnerability scanner, which is on the system. And I've got it set up to run in the Chromium browser because it requires a certain port. So you couldn't run Burp Suite at the same time. So these are just different notes on how to start this to make it a little bit easier for people to use the application. And so now if you want to start Arachne, there's a special start script up here because you have to navigate different directories, and this makes it easier to launch. And as I did that for the workshop originally, I did to make it take less time to get through that. And so if you want to start these labs up, you run this will kind of give you the same thing that was in Cherrytree. And for the usage, you type in the shell script right here. And then this will tell you the list of the applications that are available, the status, info, start or stop, and the project name, the actual name of the application. And these are all Docker-based applications. So you just go through here, and if I want to start that, so I select start, and we're going to use Buggy Web App. And so this starts up. And the nice thing about this set of scripts that I found, it's called Pentester Lab, is it gives an IP address for each one of the vulnerable apps. So you could start all the vulnerable apps at one time. And so when you're starting this up for the first time, I've actually ran this before, but it gives you the default username and password for it. And also shows you the URL for it. And the first time you run it, you'll need to run it from this install.php. And what we're running into here is see how it's saying proxies refusing connection. Up here we got Burp Suite. set up to use Burp Suite, but we're not using that yet. And so we'll try again. And so this this buggy web app, the first time you go into it, you click here, and I know this is one that Jason Haddix, that formerly was with Bugcrowd. He used to use this for classes. And so you come in here to log in, and this one is nice because it actually tells you the login credentials here. Some of them you have to go back and it's documented, and you may not be as easy to find. But you log in here, and then the different types of attacks you want to try, like SQL injection. So it sets up the environment for you to perform that certain type of hack. And you can also set the security level. So when you're starting out learning this, you don't want to start out with the high, you want to start out with low, because like cross-site scripting, whenever you start, it requires encoding as you get more complex, or the more controls they put in place on the system to try to prevent cross-site scripting. So as you go along and learn this, you can increase the difficulty and learn different methods to get around that. And you can see it shows the current level is set to low. And so you can select like cross-site scripting and go in there and or these different vulnerabilities. And so here you can go in and run your cross-site scripting against it. Okay, so yeah, this is requiring us to enter something in both fields to get it to work. And so you see where it's putting, let's see. And some of this you can actually tamper in the address bar. That's what this particular one, this get command does. And here we're just kind of show you some of the different tools. And as far as vulnerability scanners, this Arachna tool that's installed on here, I don't like it so much. I don't think it finds that much. But if you go up here and you go to web application tools, and we go to Owasp Zap, we can go in here and do a vulnerability scan against this application. And so the nice thing compared to this, the commercial version of Burp Suite will do vulnerability scans, but the community edition doesn't. So here's where if you're doing some pen tests on your own or doing some bug hunting, you want to do vulnerability scanning, but you don't want to invest the money into Burp Suite commercial version, then you can just come here. And what's nice about this too is with Burp, you have to set up the proxy where you're proxying through your browser. As you saw a while ago, we run into some problems because when I started up, I still had my proxy pointing at Burp Suite. And so we're using this proxy switching tool that we can actually have it to go through Burp Suite or Zap, or just use it without the proxy. And so we'll go back here and run our vulnerability scan. And so you can see our scan is running. And if you look here at the active scan, this actually shows when the scan's running. You can pause it or even stop it here. And as it finds vulnerabilities, you go over here to your alerts tab, and this is where your vulnerabilities are showing up. And as you start out, you'll be more dependent on vulnerability scanners until you get a little more experience doing manual testing. And so this will go in and tell you the different, like the CWEID and WASC is what I mentioned earlier, the Web Application Security Consortium. They actually show their IDs on there. And so this is showing that cross-site protection is not enabled. So this is one of the ways you try to prevent that. But since this is a vulnerable application, then they've got it set up where, of course, you don't want it to be secure. And so you can actually go through here and look at the different folders on that application. Let's see, is it still running? Yeah, it's still running. So we're like a little over a third of the way done. And also, too, at the bottom, you can take note of the flags. So you may actually even highlight over it and tell you what this is. So this is high priority, medium, and low, and then informational. There's this little blue flag next to that. And it shows you how many findings for each category. And you can also use the spider. It's actually spidering while it's testing. And you can add other applications too. Here, there's other like force browsing. This you can go in and put in like a directory, and we can go into that and let's select the site. It's not bringing up the site. Sometimes that's one of the things that's kind of finicky. It may be because I don't have the browser set up to proxy that information. But what this does, how this is supposed to function normally, is you select here, and then the application that you have. Okay, there it is. It's selected now. So we had to just go to the root of that application. So we have our, this is going to take a while, so we'll select a smaller list. And this will go through and search through popular files and directories that maybe if they're not being indexed, you're not able to find it. So you may be able to find some information in there. So it may search for you know, passwords or something. So maybe you might find some passwords by running this. And so we see some of these directories that are forbidden, that if we were maybe authenticated, we may be able to get to these certain directories. So yes, gives you a lot more information. If you run Arachne, I think we'll go ahead and pull that up because the output from the last scan should be in there. Okay. So we'll run Arachne. So this one, to get to that, we just open up Chromium. Actually, up here on the toolbar, I've got a, okay, it's got the URL to get to Arachne. And so we can go in here. And this is, you can see what a completed scan looks like. So there's really not, didn't even find all that much. Whereas compared to Owasp app, So you can actually see where Arachne's pulling the information in. Okay. And out of the two, between trying to learn Owasp Zap and learning Burp Suite, Owasp Zap's a little bit easier to get up and running on. Which, although as far as trying to learning tool that's good to know for pen testing jobs, a lot of people are looking for people with Burp Suite, so it is worth learning. And so you can go here and you can look at the different pages. You can look at the request and response. So you can see the HTTP requests. And here's the response to it. You can see some of the important information you get from HTTP headers. We're able to see like the version of Ubuntu that is running and the version of Apache that's running on that server. Now we're gonna go switch over to Burp and let's see what Burp Community Edition looks like. And this is like a version behind whenever I originally created this. Version 2 point something was still in beta, so I didn't want to install a beta tool on there. So there's newer versions where you can see 2.1.02. We're not going to update that now. But Burp does have a lot of good plugins, and some of the really good plugins require functionality of the Burp Pro. Tell you, I'll just go ahead and, for like display purposes, just to see what it looks like, I will open up Burp Suite on my local system and show you what it looks like. Okay, and this is a more current version of Burp Suite. So some of the scan functions you won't have within Burp Suite Community Edition. And then there's, as far as there's some of the tools too that you can't, some of the plugins that don't work on the non-professional version. So look at burp extender. So you go to this burp store, and if we just click the sort by pro extension, so you can see some of these tools that only work on the pro version, and that's because it requires certain functionality of the pro version to be able to use that. And speaking of like methodologies, there's a hunt plugin that Jason Haddix created that will let you go through, and it will actually show like the different methodologies and different things to look for. And you can actually change this from the Owasp Top 10 to the Web Application Hackers Handbook to select those different methodologies. This, when I was creating this VM, the default resolution, I can change that on this background, but for some reason it just isn't liking it within Burp Suite. And when you go through there, run the scan, this is open up the Owasp app is opening up certain directories and stuff from using the forced browser. And there's also, this is based on, I guess I never did start it. Yeah, it was being crawled, I guess, and opening up those because there's only certain directories on here that's got PDFs that it opens up while you're scanning it. So we'll go back and see our scan is almost completed. And so when you get started learning this, I would go through and then use something like the Buggy web app and practice the different types of attacks, do cross-site scripting and SQL injection. And I would look online. There's you can look up walkthroughs or solutions and then see how they're doing certain things, which is kind of helpful. You might do that on like the easier ones to kind of get the hang of it. And then as you get more difficult, then try to do it on your own, try to figure it out on your own, and then go back to the answers if you need. So this one's a pretty good one, as well as the Juice Shop app. And so this is a list of I put a bookmark in of each one of these applications. So when you start it up, it's over here. So like you got Owasp Juice Shop, which is a pretty good one. It's a popular one. There's actually like add-ons that you can set up to use like a CTF. So if you have a local group you're wanting to do a CTF, there's like a CTF add-on. So the way it currently works is almost like in a single user mode, only made where one person can use it at a time. But if you set it up as a CTF, then multiple people can use it at the same time and actually keep score of what they find on it too, which is kind of good whenever if you're wanting to go through and just even on your own set up have that scoreboard to see how you're progressing. And when you start these up, it's always good to look at the instructions, see if there's any instructions there, because they'll tell you if you need to do certain things when you start it. And so you look, so this brings up the interface for Juice Shop. And so this is kind of fun. We actually ran this at one of the Pwning school meetings in Denton, set it up like a CTF. You know. Let's see what else we got. And so you can actually go through if you wanted to start up all the different apps, and you can see them listed as, and there's one here that's for to practice your WordPress pen testing. You can start this one up. And then there's two different WebGoat apps on here and Matilda. So these are all pretty popular. And then as far as further study, this was like I showed on there, the Web Security Academy, which is through Portswigger. There's the URL for that. Bugcrowd University is pretty good as well. And then the vulnerable apps on that VM. So I would just work through those different apps. I mean, with that 8 different apps, that will keep you busy for a while. And just go through and you can look at the Owasp testing guide. And the nice thing is these vulnerabilities, they bring up the screen for this certain vulnerability. And so you go through and you can go through and use the Owasp testing guide to test those. Okay, so this is actually the blog for the creator of this website. So it tells you the different vulnerabilities. And here's a list of learning resources. Like I said, we'll send these out. I've actually got the link if you just want to be able to click on the link and get to it on my website, which is listed at the bottom there. And that pretty much covers what I was going to go over. Does anyone have any questions? Is everyone awake?
Any questions, anyone?
So I said I've had trouble using WebGoat and finding documentation. Well, these other apps are pretty good. WebGoat's a little bit older. I can see if I can find anything on it. Actually, on I think it's actually an Owasp project. There's like a link on Owasp's website of different vulnerable applications. Some are actually links to sites that are set up. And so, yeah, someone asked, what classes you teach at Richland? I teach the ethical hacking class and the web app pen testing class. And the web app pen testing class starts like the first week of November. It's 6 weeks long. So Olga says, I don't know what to ask yet. I'm totally new. Yeah, so it's just get in there, start playing around. Once you start playing around, you'll start thinking of questions to ask. And if anyone, yeah, also in the classes, if you go to the hackermaker.com/classes, there'll be links for registration information on there. So yeah, if anyone has questions on here, feel free to email me. Chloe can send out my email address, but there's my Twitter account. I'm always referring to DMs. There's my LinkedIn account. Feel free to connect with me. You ever have questions, let me know. If you want to call one-on-one, I do a lot of mentoring, and mentoring comes in all sizes. I mean, sometimes I've found people that it would take like a 15 or 30-minute DM conversation to say, this is what you need to start with, and they're up and running. But then some people need a little more help and attention, so I'm able to do that. In terms of web app, what kind of language does someone focus on? I would say if for web app hacking, I would try to learn HTML and JavaScript, maybe even some cascading style sheets, just to understand how that works in HTTP protocol. I think really if you're going to be a really good web app pen tester, I think you really need to understand development to some degree. Code Academy has some classes on there on HTML and JavaScript. And then so does, there's a freecodecamp.org. Freecodecamp.org takes you from HTML cascading style sheets all the way up to not only JavaScript that you would use client side, but Node.js and a lot of the JavaScript backends. JavaScript's becoming more important because now used to is just a client side technology. Now it's a backend on a lot of these servers are using like Node.js, and there's different JavaScript backends. So understanding JavaScript for web app pen tester would be probably the most valuable language to know. Python is good across all, but I don't think you get as much good out of it for web app pen testing. So I think JavaScript would do you more good. And the cool thing about freecodecamp.org is on there, once you get through the class, I mean, because it's self-paced, you can go through as slowly or quickly as you want to go through it. And once you get completed, they'll set you up with profits, and you can actually do web development for them, so you can actually get hands-on web development experience. So did that answer your question about the web development? Great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thanks for attending. I'm glad that you got something from it.
Thank you so much, Phil. Really appreciate. I know all of us are super happy about this, and looking forward to sharing the recording. I know a lot of people are sleeping right now, or they are at work hours because they're all over the world. But thank you so much. I'm more than happy to have you again.
Yeah, if you ever want to do like a network pen testing one,
sure, let's do that.
We can do that too. So I can go through and show you how to manually discover. I could give you like an overview of web app pen testing, and then go through and show you like vulnerability scanning, and then how to manually detect vulnerabilities.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Just shoot over some dates, and then I'll share it around.
Yeah, my class is a hybrid class this semester, which lectures once a week, and then all the labs are online at people's own pace. So that frees me up on Thursdays. So Thursdays I don't have as much to do, and it's a lot nicer to be able to teach from home than have to travel somewhere.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Phil.
You're welcome.
So awesome. Thank you for supporting the community, and
thanks for inviting me. I enjoyed it.
Great. Everyone, I'll be sending out the recording shortly once I have it. And yeah, everyone have a good evening, or have a good morning, or have a good afternoon, wherever you're located. And I'll see you guys around. Thanks again.
Everyone. Take care.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.